Every city has that one man everyone respects. And in Dubai, that man was Saif al-Falasi, charismatic businessman, devoted father, and the picture of success. A penthouse in downtown Dubai, a thriving logistics empire, and a reputation built on integrity. But on March 10, 2023, during what was supposed to be a father-son bonding trip to the Hatta Mountains, something unthinkable happened. A tragedy no one saw coming. Saif returned home alone that Friday evening. His 7-year-old son Ahmed didn't. The nation mourned what appeared to be a devastating hiking accident. But was it really an accident? Or was there something Saif al-Falasi had been desperate to keep buried, something worth killing for? Welcome to True Crime Journal HQ. Thanks to all my viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay tuned for daily true crime updates. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Before we dive into this shocking story, tell me where you are watching from in the comments below. Before investigators could uncover why a respected father would push his own son off a cliff, they had to understand the man behind the mask and the family that lived in fear of his perfect image. To outsiders, the Al-Falasis lived a dream. A penthouse overlooking the Burj Khalifa, luxury cars in the private garage, and invitations to every important event in the city. Aisha al-Nuaimi, elegant and poised, was the kind of wife who never caused scenes. Ahmed, their only son, was polite, well-dressed, and always accompanied his father to business dinners with a smile. But behind the polished marble walls and floor-to-ceiling windows, tension simmered like heat beneath the desert sand. Saif controlled everything. Aisha's social calendar required his approval. Her phone was synced to his. Lunch with friends? He needed names, locations, and a return time. Ahmed's future had been decided before he turned 12. Medicine or nothing. "You'll be a doctor," Saif would say at dinner, as if the conversation was already over. That's what respectable families do. Every conversation in that home was measured. Every mistake punished not with anger, but with something worse, cold, suffocating silence. Saif never raised his voice. He didn't need to. His disapproval was a presence that filled entire rooms. Aisha learned to keep the peace. She stopped questioning, stopped suggesting. She became a beautiful, quiet fixture in Saif's carefully constructed world. But Ahmed was different. For years, he'd been his father's mirror, obedient, focused, the perfect son. But as he grew older, cracks began to form. At school, teachers praised his intelligence, his curiosity, the way his mind worked through problems others couldn't see. His essays hinted at something deeper, a restlessness, a quiet rebellion brewing beneath the surface. One assignment stood out. The prompt, "What does freedom mean to you?" Ahmed wrote, "Freedom isn't about money, it's about breathing." His teacher gave him full marks and a concerned look. She asked if everything was okay at home. Ahmed smiled and said everything was fine, but she noticed he spent more time at his uncle's villa on weekends, that he'd started researching universities in Canada and the UK, places far from his father's reach. At home, Saif noticed too. The distance, the hesitation before answering questions. The way Ahmed's eyes drifted toward the door during dinner, as if he were already planning his escape. In Saif's world, control was love, obedience was respect, and disobedience was betrayal. He didn't know it yet, but his son was about to discover something that would shatter the illusion forever. And when that moment came, Saif would be forced to choose between his reputation and his family. He chose the one he'd spent his entire life protecting. The fracture that would destroy the Al-Falasi family began with something simple: a computer, a scholarship application, and a file that should never have been opened. It was a Tuesday evening in late February. Ahmed had a deadline. Applications for the University of Toronto's pre-med program were due by midnight. His own laptop was being repaired, so he did what he'd done dozens of times before. He knocked on his father's office door and asked to use the desktop. Saif was at a business dinner. "Go ahead," Aisha told him. "He won't mind." Ahmed sat at the sleek glass desk, logged in with the family password, and opened the browser to download his transcripts. The printer jammed. He clicked through folders looking for the driver software. That's when he saw it. A folder labeled Company Accounts, Private. He shouldn't have clicked. But something about the name felt wrong. Too careful. Too hidden. Inside were files that didn't belong to any legitimate business. Bank transfers to corporations with names that sounded fake: Horizon Gulf Trading LLC, Summit Freight Solutions Limited. Accounts registered in Oman, Kenya, and the Seychelles. Spreadsheets with coded language. Emails discussing shipments that never mentioned actual goods. Ahmed's hands went cold. He'd taken economics classes. He understood what he was looking at. His father wasn't just running a logistics company. He was laundering money. For nearly an hour, Ahmed sat frozen, scrolling through years of transactions. Millions of dirhams funneled through offshore accounts, payments disguised as shipping fees, a network of lies built on top of lies. He printed nothing. He closed the folder, but he couldn't unsee it. When Saif came home that night, Ahmed was waiting in the living room. Aisha had gone to bed. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the air conditioning. "We need to talk," Ahmed said. Saif smiled. Still wearing his suit jacket, still playing the role. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "I saw the files." The smile didn't fade immediately. It flickered, like a light struggling to stay on. Then, it collapsed entirely. "Ahmed, don't." Ahmed's voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "I know what you're doing. I know what those accounts are." For the first time in his life, Ahmed saw fear in his father's eyes. Not anger, not control. Fear. Saif stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You don't understand what this means. You don't understand what will happen if anyone finds out. I understand that it's illegal. It's survival." Saif's voice cracked. He caught himself, glancing toward the hallway where Aisha slept. When he spoke again, it was barely a whisper. "This city runs on appearances. One scandal, and we lose everything. Your mother's reputation, your future, everything I've built." Ahmed stood. "I didn't build this. You did. You'll destroy us. You already did." The words hung in the air like smoke. Saif's jaw tightened. His hands clenched into fists, then released. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. Colder, flatter. "You don't tell anyone about this. Not your mother. Not your friends. No one." "Or what?" Saif didn't answer. He just stared at his son with an expression Ahmed had never seen before. Something dark. Something final. Later that night, Aisha woke to the sound of raised voices downstairs. She sat up, listening. Then silence. When she came down, Saif was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. Calm. Composed. "Everything okay?" she asked. He looked up and smiled. "Just father and son talk. You know how it is." Aisha went back to bed, but Ahmed didn't sleep. He sat at his desk until dawn, copying files onto a small USB drive. On the label, he wrote one word in English: truth. It was the same drive investigators would find in his backpack 3 weeks later, after his body was recovered from the rocks below Wadi Hubei. 2 days after the confrontation, Saif walked into the kitchen where Aisha was preparing breakfast. His tone was light, almost casual. "I've been thinking," he said. "Ahmed and I should take a trip. Just the two of us. Father and son." Aisha looked up, surprised. In 17 years, Saif had never suggested anything like this. Family vacations were always planned months in advance, always included her, always centered around business conferences or social obligations. A trip? Where? The mountains. Hatta. Maybe Wadi Hubei. Somewhere quiet. We need time together. Just us. He smiled. Before he leaves for university, while we still can. Aisha's eyes softened. She'd heard the argument 2 nights before, even if she didn't know what it was about. Maybe this was Saif's way of making peace, of finally letting their son breathe. That's wonderful, she said. He'd love that. But when she told Ahmed, his face went pale. "It's just a weekend," Aisha assured him, mistaking his silence for teenage reluctance. "Your father is trying, please, for me." Ahmed looked at his mother at the hope in her eyes, the relief that her husband was finally acting like the man she'd married. He couldn't tell her the truth. Not yet. Not until he'd decided what to do with the files on that USB drive. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll go." They left early Friday morning, March 10th, before the city woke up. Saif's silver Lexus pulled out of the underground garage at 6:47 a.m., camera bags in the trunk, snacks in the back seat, 2 bottles of water, everything a father and son would need for a day trip. Saif was in an unusually good mood. He played Ahmed's favorite songs on the drive. He talked about the hiking trails, the views, how good it would be to get out of the city. Ahmed sat in the passenger seat, watching the skyscrapers shrink in the side mirror, feeling the weight of the USB drive in his jacket pocket. An hour into the drive, Saif pulled over at a scenic overlook. "Let's get a picture," he said, pulling out his phone. They stood side by side, the morning sun bright behind them, Saif's arm around Ahmed's shoulders, both of them smiling. Father and son, Saif said, checking the photo. Stronger together. He posted it to Instagram before they got back in the car. Within minutes, likes poured in. Comments from colleagues, friends, family members. Beautiful. Cherish these moments. What a blessing. Hours later, that same photo would be shared across every news outlet in the UAE. That same smile would haunt the headlines. They arrived at Wadi Hubei just after noon. The area was stunning, rugged cliffs rising above a valley dotted with acacia trees, the Hajar Mountains stretching endlessly in every direction. It was remote, peaceful, miles from the nearest road. They hiked for an hour, Saif pointing out rock formations, Ahmed taking photos on his phone. The conversation was surface level. Safe. Neither of them mentioned the files. Neither of them mentioned the argument. But the silence between words was deafening. As the sun climbed higher, Saif led them to a cliff overlooking the valley. The drop was steep, easily 70 meters down to the rocks below. The view was breathtaking. "This is perfect," Saif said, pulling out his camera. "One last picture before we head back." Ahmed walked to the edge, looking out over the expanse of desert and stone. For a moment, he felt something close to peace. The air was clean. The world was big. He could almost imagine leaving all of this behind, his father's secrets. The pressure, the control. "Come here," Saif called. "Stand right there. I want to get the mountains in the background." Ahmed turned, smiling for the camera. He didn't see his father's expression change. He didn't see the way Saif's hand tightened around the camera strap. He didn't notice the CCTV tower in the distance. Its lens pointed directly at the cliff's edge, recording everything in silent, unblinking detail. All he saw was his father, stepping closer, smiling, placing a hand on his shoulder, and then nothing but sky. The footage recovered 3 weeks later from the Environmental Monitoring Tower would become one of the most watched pieces of evidence in UAE criminal history. Grainy, silent, undeniable. The timestamp read 14 hours, 33 minutes, and 52 seconds. Two figures stand at the edge of a cliff, the desert valley stretching endlessly behind them. The taller figure, Saif al-Falasi, has his hand resting on the younger figure's shoulder. Father and son. From a distance, it could be mistaken for affection. For 11 seconds, they stand there. Saif appears to be speaking. Ahmed's head tilts slightly, as if listening. Then he turns toward the camera, toward the view, and that's when it happens. Saif's hand slides from Ahmed's shoulder to his upper arm. His grip tightens, and in one smooth, deliberate motion, he pushes. There's no hesitation, no struggle, no moment of doubt. Ahmed stumbles forward, his arms reaching out instinctively for something, anything to hold on to. His body tips past the point of balance. For half a second, he's suspended in the air, turning back toward his father. Then he disappears beyond the ledge. Saif doesn't move. He stands there, staring down at the place where his son just was. 5 seconds pass. 10. He adjusts his sunglasses, wipes something from his sleeve. Then he turns and walks away, his steps measured and calm, as if he'd just finished taking a photo. The CCTV camera keeps recording. The cliff edge remains empty. The wind stirs dust across the rocks. Nothing else moves. By the time Saif reached his car, the sun was beginning its descent. He sat in the driver's seat for nearly 20 minutes, staring at the steering wheel. Then he pulled out his phone and opened his camera roll. The selfie from that morning stared back at him. Father and son, stronger together. He deleted it. Then he restored it. Evidence of a normal day. A loving father. A tragic accident waiting to happen. At 7:18 p.m., he called emergency services. When the operator answered, his voice was shaking perfectly calibrated grief, neither too hysterical nor too controlled. "My son. I need help. My son fell. We were hiking in Wadi Hubei and he slipped." The operator asked him to stay calm, to describe the location. "Near the cliffs, the high ones. I tried to grab him. I reached for him, but I couldn't. I couldn't reach." His voice broke. "Please, you have to find him." Within an hour, the search began. Helicopters circled overhead, their spotlights cutting through the gathering darkness. Drone operators scanned the rocky terrain. A team of rescuers rappelled down the cliff face, searching for any sign of the missing teenager. Saif stood by his car, wrapped in an emergency blanket someone had draped over his shoulders. He answered questions in a daze. They'd been taking photos. Ahmed wanted to get closer to the edge. It happened so fast. One moment he was there, the next. A paramedic checked his vitals. Mild shock, they said. Understandable. Traumatic. The search continued through the night. Floodlights illuminated the valley. Rescue dogs picked their way through the rocks. By dawn, they'd found Ahmed's phone shattered screen, case cracked wedged between two boulders 30 meters down. But no body. Sometimes, a senior rescuer told Saif gently, in cases like this, it can take days. The terrain is difficult, but we won't stop looking. Saif nodded. Tears streaked his face. He's all I have, he whispered. My only son. By Saturday afternoon, the story had reached the media. Teenage boy missing after mountain hiking accident. By Sunday morning, it had evolved. Dubai businessman's son presumed dead after tragic fall. Flowers appeared outside the Al Falasi penthouse. Messages of condolence flooded Aisha's phone. Colleagues sent fruit baskets. The Pakistani embassy offered prayers. Everyone mourned the loss of a bright young life cut short. Everyone believed the story of a heartbroken father. Everyone except the camera that had watched it all happen. But that footage wouldn't surface for another 16 days. And by then, Saif al-Falasi would have attended his son's memorial service, given interviews to sympathetic reporters, and almost convinced himself that the story he'd told was the truth. Almost. In Dubai, reputation is currency. And Saif al-Falasi had spent decades building his. The initial police report classified Ahmed's death as a tragic hiking accident. The media followed suit. Headlines praised the young student's academic promise and mourned a life cut short. Editorial pieces discussed hiking safety. Nobody questioned the father's story. Ahmed's memorial service was held at the Jumeirah Mosque on a Thursday afternoon. Hundreds attended. Colleagues from Saif's company, families from Ahmed's school, business partners who'd never met the boy but knew it was important to be seen. Saif stood at the front in a perfectly tailored black kandura, greeting mourners with quiet dignity. When Aisha broke down during the eulogy, he wrapped his arm around her shoulders, holding her as cameras flashed. The image appeared in Gulf News the next morning. A father's grief. To everyone watching, he was the picture of devastation, composed but broken. A man holding his family together while falling apart inside. But behind the scenes, investigators at the Criminal Investigation Department weren't convinced. Lieutenant Rashid al-Mansouri had been assigned to review the case file as a formality. Missing person turned presumed fatality. Standard procedure. But something about Saif's statement bothered him. The timeline didn't quite fit. Saif claimed they'd been hiking for 2 hours before reaching the cliff. But GPS data from Saif's phone showed they'd arrived at that specific location only 40 minutes after leaving the parking area. Why lie about something so small? And then there was the 911 call. Al-Mansouri had listened to it 3 times. The emotion was there, the trembling voice, the desperation. But it felt performed. Too many pauses in the right places. Too much detail about things that didn't matter. I need a second opinion, he told his partner, showing her the transcripts. She listened, frowned. It's rehearsed. Exactly. They requested a follow-up interview. Saif came to the station voluntarily, accompanied by his lawyer. He answered every question calmly, consistently. But when they pressed him about the GPS discrepancy, something flickered across his face. I was in shock, he said. I may have gotten the timing wrong. Al-Mansouri made a note. People in shock don't usually overestimate time. They underestimate it. Trauma compresses minutes into seconds, not the other way around. Still, they had no evidence, no witnesses, no body. Just a grieving father and a story that felt slightly off-key. Then, on March 26th, 16 days after Ahmed's disappearance, everything changed. Khalid Rahman was an environmental officer stationed at a remote monitoring post near the Hajar Mountains. His job was tedious, reviewing footage from tower cameras that tracked weather patterns, wildlife movement, and erosion. Most days, nothing interesting happened. But on that Tuesday afternoon, while scanning footage from the Wadi Hubei Tower, he noticed something unusual. 2 figures on a cliff. Timestamp, 14 hours, 33 minutes, and 52 seconds. March 10th. He leaned closer to the screen. The taller figure had his hand on the shorter figure's shoulder. They stood there for several seconds. Then, Khalid's breath caught. He rewound the footage, watched again. His hands were shaking as he reached for his phone. I need to speak to someone in CID, he told the operator. It's about the Ahmed al-Falasi case. I have video. Within 2 hours, Lieutenant al-Mansouri was in the monitoring station, watching the footage on a larger screen. He didn't speak. He just watched as Saif al-Falasi pushed his son off a cliff, stared down at the empty space where Ahmed had been, and calmly walked away. Al-Mansouri played it 3 more times. Each viewing made his stomach tighten. Send this to headquarters, he said quietly. And get me a warrant. The recovered video changed everything. It showed the push, the deliberate, unhesitating motion, the way Saif's hand gripped Ahmed's arm before shoving him forward. The complete lack of reaction afterward. No panic, no horror, just cold calculation. But most damning of all, it showed the betrayal in plain sight. A father murdering his son while the world believed he was grieving. By that evening, forensic teams were combing through Saif's car, his home, his office. By the next morning, they'd found Ahmed's backpack still in the Lexus's trunk, and inside it, a USB drive labeled Truth. Saif al-Falasi's perfect world was crumbling, one frame at a time. The silver Lexus sat in the police impound lot under fluorescent lights, every surface waiting to give up its secrets. Forensic technician Mariam Hassan had processed hundreds of vehicles in her career. Most yielded nothing useful, a few stray hairs, maybe some mud from the scene. But when she opened the trunk of Saif al-Falasi's car, she found something that stopped her cold. Ahmed's backpack, still there, untouched. "Lieutenant," she called, "you need to see this." Al-Mansouri pulled on latex gloves and carefully unzipped the main compartment. Clothes, a water bottle, a charging cable. Then, in the interior pocket, something small and deliberate. A USB drive. Black, generic, with a single word written in English on a strip of white label tape. Truth. 20 minutes later, the drive was connected to a secured computer in the CID's digital forensics lab. The files loaded slowly, spreadsheets, scanned bank statements, email screenshots, everything Ahmed had discovered that night in his father's office. Offshore accounts in Oman registered under shell company names, transfers to Kenyan banks with coded references. A network of financial fraud spanning 3 countries in 5 years. Millions of dirhams laundered through Saif's logistics company, disguised as shipping fees and consulting payments. But it wasn't just the data. It was the annotations. In some files, someone Ahmed had added notes, timestamps, questions. "Why Kenya?" one note read. "Who is M. Osman?" another asked. The boy had been trying to understand what his father had done, trying to build a case. The forensic analyst pulled up another file, a photograph of handwritten notes on company letterhead, Saif's handwriting. The team cross-referenced it with documents from his office. Perfect match. "We have him," the analyst said quietly. Al-Mansouri leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. This wasn't just murder. This was motive. Ahmed hadn't died because of a hiking accident. He'd died because he'd found the truth and his father couldn't let it survive. But there was more. The digital forensics team had also recovered Ahmed's phone from the rocks, shattered but salvageable. They extracted the data and began combing through messages, emails, search history. Most of it was typical teenage communication. Memes, group chats, university application updates. But one message, sent 4 days before the trip, stood out. It was to a classmate named Omar, deleted. But deletion doesn't mean gone. The message read, "If something happens to me, check my dad's computer." Omar had responded with a confused emoji. "What? Why?" Ahmed never replied. Al-Mansouri read the exchange 3 times. The message wasn't proof of premeditation, but it showed Ahmed knew he was in danger, that he'd anticipated something terrible, that he'd tried to leave a trail. It was enough. On Monday, April 3rd, at 9:47 a.m., 6 officers arrived at the headquarters of Al-Falasi Logistics. They walked past the glass doors, past the receptionist who smiled and asked if they had an appointment, and straight into Saif's corner office. He was on a conference call. Expensive suit, polished shoes, the picture of success. "Saif al-Falasi," Lieutenant Al-Mansouri said, holding up the warrant. "You're under arrest for the murder of Ahmed al-Falasi and financial fraud." Saif's face went blank. For a moment he didn't move. Then he stood slowly, adjusting his cufflinks as if he were leaving for a lunch meeting. "This is a misunderstanding," he said calmly. "No," Al-Mansouri replied. "It's not." The handcuffs clicked shut in front of his staff, the same people who'd attended Ahmed's memorial, who'd sent condolences, who'd believed every word of his grief. Someone pulled out a phone. The photo captured Saif being led out of his own building, wrists bound, expression frozen somewhere between shock and rage. Within 30 minutes, the image was online. Within 2 hours, it was everywhere. Gulf News, Al Arabiya, international outlets. The man who'd built an empire on appearances was now the face of betrayal. His company's stock dropped 40% by market close. The penthouse was raided that afternoon. Aisha watched in numb silence as officers carried boxes of documents, hard drives, financial records. Neighbors gathered in hallways, whispering. By evening, every major news network in the UAE was running the story. Not as a tragic accident, not as a grieving father's nightmare, but as what it truly was, a premeditated murder, born from greed and pride, captured on camera and buried in lies. The empire Saif al-Falasi had spent his life building collapsed in a single day. And the truth Ahmed had died trying to protect, finally came to light. The Dubai Court of First Instance had never seen anything like it. Press credentials were distributed weeks in advance. International news networks reserved satellite time. Security doubled. The case of the state v. Saif al-Falasi wasn't just a trial, it was a reckoning. Dubai's most respected businessman, accused of murdering his own son for money and reputation. The trial began on May 2, 2023. The gallery was packed. Journalists, legal observers, members of Ahmed's school community. Aisha sat in the front row, flanked by her brothers, her face hidden behind oversized sunglasses. Saif entered in prison-issue clothing, his beard grown out, his once polished appearance reduced to something hollow. He didn't look at his wife. He didn't look at anyone. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They presented the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the years of financial fraud. Forensic accountants walked the jury through the money trail, millions of dirhams laundered through fake shipping contracts. But everyone was waiting for one thing. On the fourth day of testimony, the lights dimmed. A projector screen descended. The prosecutor stood, remote in hand. "What you're about to see," he said, "was recorded on March 10, 2023, at 14 hours 33 minutes and 52 seconds. This footage was recovered from an environmental monitoring tower overlooking Wadi Hubei." The courtroom fell silent. The video played, grainy, distant, but unmistakable. Two figures at the cliff's edge, father and son, Saif's hand on Ahmed's shoulder. Brief conversation. Then the push, deliberate, unhesitating. Ahmed stumbling, reaching, falling. Saif standing there, staring down, adjusting his sunglasses, walking away. The footage lasted 43 seconds. When it ended, no one moved. The silence stretched so long that someone in the gallery coughed, and it sounded like thunder. The defense attorney stood, objecting on technical grounds, camera angle, distance, lack of audio. But everyone in that room had seen what they'd seen. You can't unsee a father pushing his son to his death. The most devastating moment came during witness testimony. Aisha al-Nuaimi was called on day 7. She walked to the stand slowly, her abaya flowing behind her. When asked to state her relationship to the defendant, her voice was barely audible. "I'm his wife." The prosecutor approached gently. "Mrs. al-Nuaimi, when did you first learn the truth about what happened to your son?" Her hands trembled in her lap. "When the police showed me the video." "And before that?" She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "He said it was an accident. I believed him." Her voice cracked. "I stood beside him at the memorial. I defended him to investigators. I shouldn't have. I should have known." "You couldn't have known." "I was his mother." The words burst out of her. "I should have protected him. Instead, I protected the man who killed him." The courtroom was silent. Even the judge looked away. Saif's defense tried to salvage what they could. They argued stress, exhaustion, a mental breakdown triggered by Ahmed's accusations. Temporary insanity, they called it. A moment of rage, not premeditation. "My client loved his son," the defense attorney insisted. "This was a tragedy born from desperation, not malice." But the evidence didn't support desperation. The CCTV showed calm. The deleted Instagram post showed calculation. The offshore accounts showed motive. And Ahmed's deleted message, "If something happens to me," showed the boy knew his father was capable of this. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood. The judge asked for the verdict. On the charge of premeditated murder, guilty. On the charges of money laundering and financial fraud, guilty. Saif closed his eyes. For the first time since the trial began, emotion flickered across his face. Not grief, but something closer to resignation. He'd spent his entire life controlling the narrative. Now, the truth had spoken louder. The judge delivered the sentence the following day. Life imprisonment. No possibility of parole for 25 years. Asset forfeiture. Restitution. As officers led Saif out of the courtroom, he looked back once. Aisha was still in the gallery, surrounded by family. She met his eyes for a brief moment, then turned away. He'd spent his life building an empire. In the end, all he'd built was a prison. 6 months after the verdict, Aisha al-Nuaimi made a journey she'd been avoiding. The drive to Wadi Hubei felt longer than it was. The mountains rose in the distance, beautiful and indifferent. When she reached the parking area, she sat in her car for 10 minutes, gathering courage. The path to the cliff was marked now. Tourism officials had installed a railing, safety signs, as if precautions could undo what had happened here. At the edge, where her son had taken his last breath, a bronze plaque had been mounted into the rock, in memory of Ahmed al-Falasi, who told the truth. Aisha knelt, placing a single white rose against the metal. The wind carried it slightly, but it stayed. She closed her eyes and whispered the words she'd been carrying since the trial. "You did the right thing, my son. The world finally knows." The case had changed Dubai. National newspapers ran editorials about family honor and the cost of silence. Universities held seminars on corruption and accountability. Ahmed's story became a cautionary tale and a call to action. 3 months after the sentencing, Aisha stood before a room of reporters and announced the Ahmed al-Falasi Foundation. Its mission: to support young whistleblowers, victims of domestic abuse, and anyone trapped by secrets too dangerous to tell. "My son died because he chose truth over silence," she said, her voice steady. "No one else should have to make that choice alone." The foundation opened offices in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Within a year, it had helped dozens of young people escape abusive situations, report corruption, and find safety when speaking up cost them everything. Meanwhile, the CCTV footage that exposed Saif became one of the most viewed pieces of evidence in UAE history. It was studied in law schools, referenced in ethics courses, a silent, unblinking reminder that truth, no matter how deeply buried, eventually surfaces. And somewhere in a maximum security prison, Saif al-Falasi sat in a cell, stripped of his empire, his reputation, and his freedom, left with nothing but the memory of the son he destroyed and the truth he couldn't kill.